In the heart of Chicago, where the skyline pierced the clouds and the wind carried both ambition and exhaustion, lived a young woman named Elena Brooks. If you saw Elena on the train each morning, you'd think she had everything together. She wore tailored blazers, neutral heels, and carried a leather tote that held her planner, tablet, and a neatly packed lunch. She smiled at strangers. She gave up her seat for elderly passengers. She laughed at light jokes from coworkers. To the world, Elena was polished. But behind that smile was a battle no one saw. At 29, Elena worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized firm downtown. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the bills. She had grown up in a small suburb outside Columbus, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital. From childhood, Elena learned two things: work hard and don't complain. Strength, her mother would say, is quiet. Elena carried those words like armor. After college, she moved to Chicago with a suitcase, $800 in savings, and a heart full of hope. The city felt alive: loud trains, glowing billboards, street musicians under bridges. She believed this was where her real life would begin. But life didn't unfold the way she imagined. 3 years before, Elena's father, who had been absent most of her life, reappeared, sick and financially broken. Though he hadn't been present during her childhood, she felt responsible. She started sending money every month. She never told her friends. Around the same time, her younger brother, Marcus, dropped out of community college after falling into depression. Elena became the quiet glue holding her family together. She paid his rent for a few months. She called him every night. She encouraged him to seek therapy, even as she ignored her own spiraling thoughts. On the outside, she kept smiling. Inside, she was unraveling. Every morning, Elena woke at 5:30 a.m. long before her alarm. Anxiety would grip her chest like a tightening rope. Her mind raced: deadlines, bills, family problems, expectations. She would stare at the ceiling of her small studio apartment and whisper, "You can do this." Then she'd get up, make coffee, and put on her smile like makeup. At work, she was known as dependable. Her manager, Thomas Green, often praised her during meetings. "Elena always delivers," he'd say. She'd nod politely, hiding the exhaustion behind her eyes. What no one knew was that she was working late nights freelancing, designing logos, writing copy, doing whatever small projects she could find online. Not because she wanted to climb higher, but because she needed to send more money home. Her savings account never grew. Her dreams slowly shrank. One Friday evening, after an especially draining week, Elena sat alone at her desk long after her coworkers had left. The office lights hummed softly. The city outside shimmered with golden reflections from Lake Michigan. She stared at her computer screen, but the words blurred. Her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus: "I don't think I can do this anymore." Her heart dropped. She called him immediately. He didn't answer. For the first time in years, Elena felt her smile crack completely. Her hands trembled. Tears welled up, hot and unstoppable. She rushed out of the building and stood on the sidewalk, the cold Chicago wind cutting through her blazer. Cars rushed past. People laughed nearby. The world kept moving. But inside, she felt like she was collapsing. Marcus finally texted back, "I'm okay. Just tired." Relief flooded her, but it was mixed with something else: anger. Not at him. At herself. At the pressure. At the constant pretending. She realized something painful: she was trying to save everyone while silently drowning. That night, instead of going home, Elena walked aimlessly through downtown. She ended up near Millennium Park, staring at the city lights reflecting off the polished metal of public art installations. Tourists took photos. Couples held hands. She sat on a bench and let herself cry. Not the quiet tears she wiped away quickly, but deep, shaking sobs she had suppressed for years. For the first time, she didn't try to be strong. The next morning, her eyes were swollen, but something inside her felt different. Not lighter exactly, but honest. On Monday, she did something she had never done before. She told the truth. When her coworker, Jasmine Carter, asked, "You okay? You look tired," Elena almost gave her usual response. "I'm fine." But she stopped. "Actually," she said softly, "I'm not." Jasmine paused, surprised, but not uncomfortable. They sat in the break room, and Elena shared, carefully at first, then fully, about her father, Marcus, the financial strain, the anxiety. Jasmine listened. Really listened. "You don't have to carry everything alone," Jasmine said gently. "Have you thought about talking to someone?" Elena had suggested therapy to her brother countless times. But she had never allowed herself the same grace. That week, she scheduled her first therapy appointment. Walking into that office felt scarier than any presentation she'd ever given. It felt like admitting weakness, but as she sat across from the therapist and began to speak, she realized something powerful: vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was courage. Week by week, Elena began peeling back layers she didn't even know she had built. She explored her fear of disappointing people, her need to prove her worth, her belief that love had to be earned through sacrifice. She learned boundaries. She learned that helping family didn't mean destroying herself. She had a difficult conversation with her father about what she could realistically provide. She set a fixed amount and stopped stretching herself beyond it. It felt terrifying, but freeing. She helped Marcus find local mental health resources instead of trying to be his only support system. She reminded him that professional help was strength, not shame. And slowly, she began to invest in herself again. She reduced her freelance workload. She started attending a Saturday morning writing class, something she had loved in college but abandoned in the rush to survive. Writing became her therapy outside therapy. She wrote about women who smiled through storms. About silent battles. About invisible strength. One evening, her instructor pulled her aside. "Your voice is powerful," he said. "It's honest. You should submit this." Elena hesitated. The old fear whispered, "Who do you think you are?" But the new voice, the one growing stronger, whispered back, "Why not you?" She submitted an essay to an online publication. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, while sitting at her desk, she received an email, "We'd love to publish your piece." Her heart pounded as she read the message again and again. The essay was titled, "Smiling Outside, Fighting Inside." When it was published, messages began pouring in from strangers. "Thank you for writing this. I thought I was alone. This feels like my life. You gave words to something I couldn't explain." Elena cried again, but this time, the tears were different. They weren't from exhaustion. They were from connection. She realized her pain had purpose. Her story, once hidden behind a polite smile, was now a bridge for others. Months later, Elena stood at a small local storytelling event in Chicago, hands trembling as she approached the microphone. The room was filled with maybe 50 people. Nothing grand. But to her, it felt monumental. She looked out at the audience and smiled, not the practiced, protective smile, but a real one. "I used to think strength meant never breaking," she began. "I thought it meant smiling no matter how heavy things got. But I've learned something different. Strength is asking for help. Strength is setting boundaries. Strength is choosing yourself, even when you've spent your life choosing everyone else." The room was silent, listening. "I was smiling outside," she continued, voice steady now, but fighting inside. "And I know I'm not the only one. If that's you, please know this, you don't have to fight alone." Applause filled the room, but more important than the sound was the feeling inside her chest. Peace. Her life wasn't suddenly perfect. Bills still existed. Family challenges didn't vanish. Anxiety didn't magically disappear. But now, she faced it differently. She had tools. She had support. She had honesty. Elena still woke up early some mornings, her thoughts racing. But instead of whispering, "You can do this," as a command, she whispered it as compassion. You can do this. Not because you have to be strong for everyone, but because you are allowed to be strong and soft at the same time. In a city as vast and restless as Chicago, millions walked the streets carrying unseen battles. Elena was one of them. But she was no longer hiding behind a smile. She wore it now not as a mask, but as a reflection of a fight she was finally winning. And in learning to stop pretending, she discovered the most powerful truth of all: sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to keep smiling through the pain. It's to let the world see that you're human. And still rise anyway.